look, I know PSG won the Champions League, and they deserve the congratulations, but based on how close we were to beating them, I think we can all agree we basically won the Champions League. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Yeah, that was a thing that if you posted that out on social media after the Champions League final, anything about, like how good we looked against PSG or how close that tie was, or just anything remotely positive or optimistic about how we handled that situation, I don't think people were super in the mood for it. I'll just put it that way. But it was an interesting, if not exciting, Champions League final. We'll touch on it a bit, maybe through more of an Arsenal-centric lens. Someone said I was in the Arsenal Vision Podcast Patreon Discord talking about the Champions League final through an Arsenal lens, and someone replied, "Why does it always have to be about us?" And I was like, because this is the Arsenal Podcast Patreon Discord. It is literally always about us, but that's totally okay. I enjoyed aspects of the Champions League final. I think it'd be fun to discuss. We've also got obviously just transfer madness that we're going to touch on. We still will do our end of season player ratings, revisit some of our predictions and what we got wrong and right about them today, actually, and we're going to take some of your questions. One of the biggest questions, though, and I think it's the one on everybody's lips, is how old is Clive Palmer today? Because today of all days is Clive Palmer's birthday. Hello and happy birthday, Clive.
Hello. How are you?
How are you?
I'm all right.
You don't look one day older than the age you were last year. Maybe one day. One day older.
I am 61 years of age. Right?
61 years young.
Exactly. So
surely you said 16, not 61. Come on.
But I sort of, on my 60th, I just sort of just let it go by. Just forgot sort of thing.
Yeah, so, I didn't really do anything for my 50th. I just kind of skated past it.
You know, you're just a shy individual, you know what I mean?
Definitely don't have main character energy, nothing like that.
Okay, who cares? Just a birthday. So me and him, right, same age, right? So that's how you can always tell how old I am. So there you go.
Fair enough, Clive. Well, happy birthday. I wish you nothing but joy and happiness. I love you dearly, and I'm happy for you that you have survived to another year despite Arsenal putting you through the ringer. Actually, and oh boy, talk about terrible pivots, but it does lead me to want to say, Tim, do you want to say a word? I don't know the individual, but it sounds like the Arsenal community, the Arsenal family, lost somebody recently. I only just came across this on Blue Sky, so apologies for not knowing more of the details, but apparently someone that meant a lot to your group and the people that you go to games with. So hello, Tim, and I hate to bring the mood down, but do you want to just share a word quickly on what happened? Because I'm not totally across it.
Yeah, sure. So Gary Reid, who people who, if you go to away games, there's every chance if you don't know the name, you know the face, someone who followed Arsenal home and away for many, many years, hugely passionate Arsenal fan, unfortunately had a battle with cancer. And unfortunately we lost him this morning. And you know, he leaves behind a young family. I won't go too much into that as well. It's really, really heartbreaking. But someone who's a big part of my match day experience, both home and away for many, many years. So big love to everyone who knows him, you know, as well as I do, better than I do, and particularly to his family. But yeah, someone who's a very, very big part of the away day you know, the match day tableau, as it were, and someone who went to Paris Saint-Germain, went to Real Madrid when, you know, frankly, he wasn't in fantastic condition, because that's how committed he was to going to games and how much he loved the club. So, yeah, very, very sad, and big love to everyone that knows him or knew him.
Yeah, love and thoughts and prayers and respect and consideration to his family and to his friends and everybody in the Arsenal community that was touched by him, and all of us in the Arsenal community who have lost someone. And I'm glad he got that Madrid experience. I mean, that's a beautiful, you know, memory of the Arsenal, and one that I'm glad he got to experience. But yeah, so certainly not the pivot that I meant to make from a jocular celebration of Clive's birthday, but that is sort of the yin and the yang of life right there. So, you know, certainly our condolences to everybody touched by that loss. And so we will talk a little bit about the Champions League. We will do a bit on transfers and prediction revisits. We will have the scouting videos. Oh, the scouting videos. They are coming back with, I would say, with a ferocity now. We are also going to be kicking off our Transfer Daily. I'm trying to decide whether to kick that off this week or next week. I feel like it does feel a bit early. There's this 10-day transfer window, and then it closes again. But I'm gonna canvass people and decide when we want it. But if you want transfer daily, if you want the scouting videos, use code AVP when you sign up for Patreon, and you'll get it half off. And I should mention, sign up on a browser. If you sign up in the app, in the Apple App Store, Apple adds 30% on top for them, because they're a struggling little tech company trying to get by. You know, they need all the help they get. So, but you still use the app in the Apple App Store. It's just if you sign up on the just on a browser, then you don't pay the extra on top. Okay, enough of that nonsense. Let's get on with it. And Clive, we'll talk about the Champions League briefly. Obviously, PSG have won the Champions League in stunning, dominant fashion. I think they were the best team in Europe. I think they are the best team in Europe. I think Barcelona has an argument, but they just don't take defending seriously. The way they play is exciting and exhilarating, but maybe not super serious. It's like Ange with more talent. PSG, on the other hand, really effective in all facets of the game. And they've done it now in a totally different manner than they did, recruiting the best young French talent, a manager with a system that I think actually is very similar to Mikel's in some ways, and we might come on to that. But I think it's also very important to reiterate, a team that also I think has a 20% bigger wage bill than the second biggest wage bill in Europe. So this is still not a fairy tale story by any means, but what are your sort of top line reactions to PSG finally getting that Champions League trophy that they have so coveted?
Yeah, I think for me, it's when it's your time, it's your time. And we've giggled at them in the past when they've tried to get players in that maybe not quite balanced to try to create something, and they've achieved, right? They've created this this massive brand where people used to, all the top players in the world went to. Didn't really care if they defended or ran around. It didn't really matter. Phase one was create the brand, get in there with the Jordan brand as well, create something off the pitch commercially, and they did that. And then Enrique's come in and he's had a lot more power, shall we say, over the recruitment. And some of those older players have gone and taken their wallets with them. And they've gone another way, and so they should do. I mean, Paris is almost a little bit like, I'm going to use an analogy here, but it's a bit like South London, right? It's got a lot of football talent there, and why wouldn't you leverage from the talent around you rather than going abroad to buy expensive, overpaid talent? So they've struck on the model, and so the football side of me says, you know what, that's really good. You look at their team, midfielders are nice, they rotate, defenders are steady, fullbacks are really expressive and expansive, and they have 3 or 4, 5 wing forwards to choose from, all wingers that move around, and I love my wing forwards, right? So when I look at their team, it's like, great, goalkeepers at 100 feet tall, make saves out of nowhere. You look at it, you think, you know what, it's good. It's all there, in place, complete, ready to go. They won the league ages ago. They're resting full 11s for the games that really matter. And that does make a difference. I mean, Inter Milan at the weekend, they looked their age, didn't they? They looked like a team that had a few too many games they've had to play because they've been competing for a league, which if they chucked the Champions League, they'd have probably won the league. And it's a bit, sometimes the English clubs suffer from this, what happens on a Saturday and the Wednesday that PSG don't. I'm not trying to take anything away from them, but you're both nodding to you understand how this really works, right? When you turn up to a game fit and fresh versus when you are a few days after playing Aston Villa. It's different, right? And we suffered that last year and a bit of that this year. And they've won it, and they deserve to win it. And I think there's a deeper story out there. There are journalists out there that understand what's happened to that organisation over many, many years. But I suppose what triggered a few things at the weekend for me was, obviously, we get the TNT commentary. Rio Ferdinand said something like, it's a victory for football. And I immediately went, hold on a minute, son. Hold on a minute. This isn't Crystal Palace. This isn't that type of story. This is a big story, nation state story with billions spent to get here. What they've done in the last year or so does not take away what's happened over the previous half decade, etc. So that's what triggered my Twitter feed anyway at the weekend.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you can admire what they've built. I don't think the fact that they're nation state owned and how much they spend takes away from admiring what they have. You know, I mean, you can decide whether it cheapens it in some way, certainly not literally. And that's fine. But I do think from a footballing standpoint, Tim, that is interesting to see how they play and what they've built and the approach they've taken to get to summit the mountain. And they press, and they have a 9 that doesn't stay in the 9 position, that pulls out wide, that goes into all different kinds of places. They win duels, and they get it wide early and try to win with talent on the edges. And I do think that there's a lot of similarities to what we do. And by the way, when I say what we do, I'm not saying this particularly unique. It is sort of a positional football system. It is sort of a pressing football season. I mean, Hansi Flick does some of that, but obviously with a slightly different emphasis on how much they defend or how they're able to defend. Pep obviously does some of that. I would argue that, Slot even does a bit of it. It's not like this is, Arsenal and PSG are the two teams doing it. I'm not saying that, but I'm wondering if you look at it and say it's kind of a validation just stylistically that this is still an approach that can work. Or do you see perhaps subtle or even significant differences that we should observe in the way they go about things?
Yeah, I'll preface this by not answering your question and just touching on.
Okay, Clive.
I was going to say, Tim just turned into me on my birthday.
I'll come to that. I will come to that. But I'd really point to the work of someone like Miguel Delaney, who I think is really, really good at consistently keeping this stuff in perspective and saying, no, when they win the Champions League, that is the best time to talk about this. PSG's wage bill is bigger than Inter's turnover.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's financially, this is a massive mismatch. And I'm with Clive as well in terms of, I think the Barcelona game, that was it for the Inter team. Like what they had to put into that, in a weird way, probably cost them 2 trophies. And it was a bit like, you'll remember the season, Clive, was before I was born, but you've already divulged your age. But
Here we go. Get ready for it, Clive.
Arsenal in 1980, right? They got to 2 finals, but in the effort it took to get to those 2 finals meant they lost both of them. And I kind of think that's what's happened to Inter. It's not just fatigue. If they'd won the league by 1 point, instead of losing it by a point, I bet you they wouldn't have lost 5-0 on Saturday. They might not have won, but I bet they wouldn't have lost 5-0. But you lose the league by a point, and it's just like, Jesus. But anyway, so there's obviously layers to this because the PSG team, still very expensive, by the way, still very expensively assembled. And but obviously it's a bit more likeable. But I also think, Elliot, we're too quick when someone wins a tournament to try and provide a narrative thread that just ties everything up and that wraps up football for the season. So when a team wins a trophy, we go, that's the best style. That's the style everyone needs to play. And we had that with Spain for a few years, right? And then loads of teams tried to play like Spain. And then it was like, actually, we haven't got Xavi, Iniesta and Busquets. So it was actually what produced the competition was the teams who kicked against that. And like with PSG, I've seen a lot of this kind of they've got freedom, they've got fluidity, and they have, don't get me wrong, but Luis Enrique bombed Mbappe out. He was dropping him last season, and why was he dropping him? Because he doesn't press, because he doesn't play the positional football, right? So there's freedom, but it's within a structure, and that's probably the sweet spot, and PSG really hit that sweet spot. It took them some time to get there, though, because when we played them in October, They didn't look like that team to me. They look lost. They look young. They look weak to me when we beat them up in October. But they've had some time, and I think they've got an excellent coach, Luis Enrique. And obviously, there's a story there as well, a very human story. That's there's kind of 2 sides to this PSG victory, and the human story of Luis Enrique, and also I think his capability as a coach, because he's won 2 trebles now. Yeah. I know winning the treble like in France is kind of different, but no one's done it at Barcelona since he did it. So, but yeah, I think if we were to look, I don't think we should do this. I think you should do what you're doing as a team. But if we were to look at PSG, and I look at some of the things we started to do with Saka, when he came back from injury, he wasn't just standing on the right touchline, was he? He was turning up front, he was turning up on the left. So, like, I don't think Arteta needs a lot of convincing to be a bit more fluid, but it's fluidity within a structure. And it took PSG time to get there. But to Clive's point, the league was done for them by November, December, January, whatever. They can rest entire teams between the legs of these Champions League games, but that can go against you as well. I know Bayern for several years said, actually, when it came to quarter-final, semi-final time, we weren't tested enough in the league and we fell off a little bit, and that can happen as well. But yeah, I think Clive's right. When it's your time, it's your time. And I think, again, there's a big kind of, PSG ditched the superstars and they've gone with this model. Still really expensive, really expensively acquired players. And I get that, but people forget they nearly won it in their Galacticos era. They went to the final in 2021 and they just lost it by 1 goal to Bayern Munich. That previous Galacticos project could have delivered the Champions League. It was so close to doing it. And I think there's probably too much of a rush to be a bit too definite about things, particularly when it comes to a tournament. Real Madrid and Man City getting knocked out as well. I think that opened it up for everyone, ourselves included, and we can have regrets about that as well.
Clive?
Yeah, I totally agree. And even in this project, let's be honest, if Villa were a bit braver, particularly in the away leg, Villa could have took them out, right? So, and they just didn't quite. They just Unai'd it, the away leg. They just Unai'd and conceded that 3rd goal. Remember in the last minute? Man, they must have regrets, and we got bigger regrets. But at least when we sort of lost to PSG, the chances that we created were high quality chances, and they were saved by an amazing goalkeeper who is part of their team. So it's okay for him to make saves, and I've looked at them chances all the time, and I can't really have a lot of blame on our players for many of them. We went through the process and we just didn't quite execute, and that's just
the
part
Saka
of football.
miss. I would just underscore as slightly different.
Yeah, but
I
don't think that was going to change things. Maybe it would have done.
Was
Maybe it would have
74th
done.
minute roughly?
Yeah, maybe it would have
I'd
done.
like to see those last 16, 20 minutes. Yeah.
But even that one, with the goalkeeper diving in front of him, the ball sort of hit him. And when you saw that go over, you're not thinking, well, I wasn't thinking, well, that's ridiculous, he should have scored. I was hopeful he should have scored. But just a nature shot. If he has a touch now, which we did, that's the cool thing to say from the settee, have a touch, son. You've got loads of time. But when you're in the moment, he waved the leg out, right, and he went over the bar. So yeah, it's just, in football, just win, mate. If you win, it's okay. If those Galacticos had won, we'd all be talking about what a great model this is, follow the Real Madrid model and look at what he's produced. They didn't win, so they tore it up, right? This model, if they'd have lost at Villa, we'd all be saying they need to get a few more stars in. They haven't got enough. They're too young. They're too inexperienced. They couldn't handle the pressure when it mattered. Just win your football matches and write your own story. And that message is not just for PSG, it's for Arsenal Football Club as well. Very much so.
Yeah, I would like to highlight 2 things, and then we'll move on from this. One is they have the luxury, because their league is relatively easy for them, to bed in slowly and still win their league. And I think Tim called this out. That team that we played in the league phase is not the team that we faced in the knockout rounds. They waited to get Kvaratskhelia until January. But let's not forget, Doué was 19 at the start of the season?
Yep.
João Neves was 19, 20 at the start of the
20,
season? 20?
Doué's 20 tomorrow.
Yeah, so he was 19. João Neves was 20, right? They had added these players that were young, that were new, that needed to bed in. They needed to get their system and their rhythm of their midfield established, their pressing structure established. Dembele was playing out wide, okay? By the time you get to the end of January, now it's Kvaratskhelia, Doué, and Dembele up front. Barcola becoming an impact sub. And Dembele learning to play the center forward position in this really unique way where he floats all over and he drags people out of position. And suddenly now, they're a juggernaut. Now, if Arsenal bought 19-year-olds this summer and it took us till roughly January to get it all fitted together and ready, do you think we'd still be in with a shout to win the league and people would be saying we had the right transfer strategy? No. Now, if we had just won 5-0 in a Champions League final at the end of it, they might, yes. But you get my point. They have a bit of a luxury, and granted, they've not taken this approach before, so it was a roll of the dice. It was a change of direction, and they should be praised for it. But it was a decision to go for a solution that needed time to develop, and they had the luxury of that time. And it paid off, and it will continue to pay off because they're still very young, and they're probably still going to be very good.
Can I... Sorry,
Please,
just like a real side point that I think is really interesting. I listened to so many previews around this game and stuff like that. What was the name of the young player that scored at the end, the 18-year-old, who they bought for like 50 million, it turns out?
Well, that's what's funny, and no one had even heard of him. And it turns out he was not some free transfer.
From their academy. But
his name is, would you like his name?
Yes.
Okay, so the name, he scored the 5th goal, Seni Mayulu. That's right.
Yes, that's right. So I listened to something, it might even have been on Phil's podcast. I listened to so many, I lose track, but they bought him from and but what's really interesting is Rennes apparently have this model where they specifically decided to produce dribblers because so few academies are producing them at the moment. And they've almost made like an economic kind of marketing decision that, lots of teams aren't producing these players. Lots of people want these players. Why don't we produce loads of them so people come to us?
Interesting.
So it's just like a really interesting sidebar.
Yeah, kind of like, Foxconn makes the screens for iPhones. Rennes makes the dribblers. If you need dribblers, come to Rennes. That we're your market for dribbling players, Clive.
Yeah, this is a really interesting point, and we've gone off on a tangent, so let's stay here, right?
Yeah, let's take
a visit to Tangent Town. With the Rice, Caicedo, Enzo Fernandez, we're getting Zubimendi this year. Everything is around number 6s. Everything's about that. They're the most valuable players in your team. They control the rhythm, they control the momentum, and they normally control the first pass out, sitting between centre-backs, and you can build through them. So that everyone can understand tactically now in this positional game, that is a key player in your system. But as systems develop and coaches recognise, you know what, we're not going to dash around, particularly if we're an inferior team. We're going to mid-block or we're going to low-block you. So suddenly, who are the next things that everybody wants? It's dribblers, isn't it? It's carriers, people that run, because when you're faced with 10 people in front of you, nice and narrow in 3 lines, squeezed together, no spaces, how are you going to break that? So everyone's doing the same thing. Every coach will say to his team that may be inferior to some of the big teams, if I can get you to run less, but be ready to run when we have the ball, but when we have settled defence, we're going to do this. And we all know what it is now, so we all watch games attack versus defence so many times. That's why half of us are bored when it's not our team. You know what I mean? And so now dribblers are it. So as we are trying to talk about transfers, I'm not going to take you there yet, Elliot, but how we try to talk about transfers, I'm thinking about people who can run around people and deal with 2-on-1s and get the ball out of there so we get our overloads elsewhere. So the trend is going to be towards wingers. So if Rennes decided that, I'm not saying because of those reasons, they are right there. And Doué at 19 cost nearly 50 mil. And that looked like a bargain at the time, I'll be honest with you. And it's a bargain today, isn't it? It definitely is after he's dominated the Champions League final at that age. So football, the next trend, ball carriers. We've got Sterling, though, so we'll be all right. Don't worry about it.
We'll be fine. And look,
Thiago Sterling, that is, by the way.
I have seen comments like, we should have been in for Kvaratskhelia, or why didn't we go for Doué? That's really smart. First of all, if you think you can predict who the 18-year-old is who's going to be an absolute global superstar, then be my guest. But I think there's an appetite for us to finish the project, so to speak. And I don't know that a lot of people consider 18-year-olds to be the idea. Now, I do think we were interested in Doué, and I do think people knew about Doué, and I know that because we scouted him. And we were impressed by him. We talked about him a lot. But he's a French player from France who was wanted by a French team in Paris. And I just think that's going to be a really hard competition to win. With Kvaratskhelia, if you think you can give the agent £20 million under the table and £300,000 a week wages and a €70 million transfer fee, go get Kvaratskhelia. But I do think we have to accept there are going to be times when clubs like City, for example, or PSG get players, and you can't. having already beaten City to a superstar once. I don't think you do it a lot to these oil state-backed clubs. Where you can get upset is if, clubs like Liverpool, for example, are getting the players you want. Then you could say, why did he go there instead of here? Anyway, that's a little side point. But the last point I want to make on this, and then we'll move on, is simply, I don't think it's all that bad to measure yourself against the best. I think that there's value in that. And people might be rolling their eyes knowing where this is going to go, but I'm going to go there anyway. I think we can feel really good about the performance we put in against PSG. Do you want to know how badly PSG smacked Liverpool in the game they lost at home? They outshot them 27-2. I mean, that's the ultimate smash and grab. And you can say, war a victory. But yes, Liverpool won that game. They got smacked. And then you know what happened at Anfield? They got smacked again and lost on XG. Here's an interesting stat. If you care about XG at all, and I know many of you don't, but for those of you who do, PSG have lost on XG 6 times this season. 6 total across every single game they played. 3 of those games are Arsenal, and Arsenal. Okay? I think that's a data point that's relevant. Donnarumma is a PSG player. And to Clive's great point, when a goalkeeper has a great performance, that's part of the team. But I think Donnarumma was the difference between us going through and PSG going through. It was a well-contested tie. If you believe PSG was better, I'm not going to sit here and yell at you and say you're wrong. I'm going to say both teams got their punches in. And we just couldn't quite get them in the back of the net, and they did. And that was the difference. And given the injuries and given how we went into that tie and what we had to do and, Partey getting the silly suspension, and so we couldn't play Marino at 9, overall, I think we can feel good about how we competed at that level against a team of that quality. And that's at least a little reminder that against the very best, as we've seen, by the way, this season in the Premier League, we haven't lost to the Big Six in 700 and something days, as we saw against Real Madrid. Against the very best, we measure up. It's maybe the others, the best of the rest, the also-rans, where we have some work to do figuring out how to get the goals we need to turn 0 or 1 points into 3. So I think you can at least look at how we measure ourselves when we come up against the best and say, this manager and this team and what we're doing seems to be capable of going toe-to-toe with the absolute best clubs and coming away looking pretty good. If not quite on top in this instance, pretty good. And I don't think it's all that wrong to at least notice that. That's not me saying we basically won the Champions League or we deserve to win the Champions League. No, PSG were very good and they deserved it. But we measured up. And I think that's fair. So before we take some questions in part 2, like this is the Arscast or something, I want to just quickly revisit a bit of a thing that we do every season, which is our predictions. And I've thrown them on the screen. And Clive and Tim, I hope you can see them. And let me know if you can't.
He says no, so you can't shame me.
Yeah. Clive goes, no, can't see him. Nope, no idea. I think it's always interesting to revisit these. Let's start with just the team ones, Clive. All of us had Arsenal winning the league. Interestingly, points-wise, I had us at 88, Tim at 87, Clive at 90, Paul at 92, Scott at 87. Goals scored is where we obviously really missed the boat. 89, 89, 90, 92, 92. Goals allowed, 27, 26, 25, 26, 25. So I think I expected a season, ironically, slightly worse than the season before, very slightly. But I thought it would be enough. Where I was right, ironically, is that a slightly worse season would have won us the league, right? Because Liverpool finished on 84 points. But we weren't slightly worse. We were quite a bit worse. So, Clive, I'll start with you. Any takeaways when you look at what you were expecting here, when you look at your predictions, which were Arsenal, City, Liverpool, Newcastle? That was your top 4 prediction. And any of these jump out at you at a place where you'd say, I think this or I think that, or you just have any reconsiderations of what you thought in that moment?
Yeah, the season has its flow, right? So I went, I was pretty comfortable. I can remember the day, the sun was shining. It was Arsenal at home versus Brighton. I was in the Tollington. I met some people from Boston. It's their first game, and I was chatting away to them and wishing them all the best for the day. We're 1-0 up at half time. Odegaard took a kick. Oh, he should come off. He didn't come off. And then Declan Rice gets sent off by the corner flag right in front of me. And it felt like from that day, all bets were off. because everything seemed to change from that day. And it sounds crazy. A simple, it might have been a 3:00 on a Saturday. That shouldn't be the case, right? And we end up drawing that game. We learned some lessons tactically. We ended up having suspensions. We ended up losing Odegaard thereafter in the international break, and I'm sure that injury was part of it. And if I'd have said to you, there's going to be 5 different English winners of trophies this year, and Arsenal are not one of them, I think at this time of the year we'd have been shocked. If 5 different teams win a trophy, and I expect us to be there to win something, and we're all looking at the league. As part of my researching and getting my brain recalibrated, I just happened to find, I wanted to find a couple of high moments. So do you remember the week of Sporting away, Elliot, and then West Ham away at the Saturday? I'm not sure if you went, Tim, on the Saturday to West Ham. I think you did, yeah, nodding. Mate, at that moment in time, we had no goal-scoring problems, did we, that week? We had no balance problems. Everything we predicted seemed to be coming true. We just stuck 5 in Sporting's neck and stuck 5 in West Ham's neck. And I looked at those games, and I tell you now, I can't see a problem. Just can't see one. And it just shows you how quickly things can change, and that's what we got to get ready for. How we manage that, how we manage our depth. And you were talking earlier about PSG, and you will look at the bench for the PSG home game. I urge you to look at it. It's like that's not winning anything, and that's been our issue, right? We just didn't have enough. And so whatever high points we had, in hindsight, they were never going to sustain, because of the injuries and the lack of depth and the red card targeting, shall we say, that felt a little bit unfair. But we are slightly biased in that, aren't we?
Yeah, I think there's some interesting individual stuff here. I will point out, by the way, guys, all of us, except for Paul, who I will shame in a moment, had roughly pretty close to the top 4. I had Arsenal, City, Liverpool, Chelsea, which was right, except for the obvious order of Arsenal, City, and Liverpool, unfortunately. Tim at Arsenal, City, Liverpool, Newcastle, which could have been right up until the final day. They finished 5th. Clive at Arsenal, City, Liverpool, Newcastle. Again, same thing. Scott had Arsenal, City, Liverpool, Newcastle. Paul, who we will now name and shame, had Arsenal, City, Liverpool, Tottenham Hotspur, who, and I want to emphasize this, slightly missed 4th place by 12 positions. Okay, glad I got that out. And by the way, despite their awesome season that everybody's been raving about, sack their manager, which is definitely a thing you do when you've had a great season. And I hope they don't appoint Thomas Frank, because he's likable and they won't be a laughingstock. They won't be good. They'll never be good, but they won't be laughingstock. By the way, I should also point out that we were all way too bullish on United. Tim had him 5th, Clive had him 6th, Paul had him 7th, Scott had him 7th. I was willing to go as low as 8th. They also did not live up to those lofty standards. So kudos to Manchester United. Tim, I do want to touch on quickly anything that stands out for you from the individual sections of predictions. And I think there's a huge lesson to be learned in why injuries are so damaging. When you look at the fact that all 5 of us picked Arsenal to finish first, right? All 5 of us. And then you look at the individual section, you get a sense of how we thought we'd get there. I had Kai as our top scorer. I had Odegaard as our player of the season. I had Jesus as a breakout player, right? I had, let's see, Odegaard goals and assists, 20.5, over. Saka goals and assists, 24.5, over. Kai goals and assists, 22.5, over. Jesus goals and assists, 14.5, over. Not a single one of those players accomplished a single one of those goals and assists, so to speak. And we know why. Availability was a huge part of it. When you look at the individual section, Tim, is that really where the story of the season is? You look at these players that we were depending on going into the season, and through availability and poor performance in some instances, none of them were able to hit the level we would have expected.
Yeah, by the way, you haven't shamed me there, but I had Zinchenko as my breakout player.
I mean, he broke out of the starting lineup and onto the bench. So you were right, depending on how you define breakout. If it makes you feel better, mine was Jesus, and, he did his knee, and that was the end of that.
He got injured. And to be fair, you were on track for that because he was scoring before he was injured. I think I think my thinking on Zinchenko was not that he would be like that, because there's also a question about who makes the most starts at left back, and I still had Calafiori, But I think my thinking last year was Zinchenko's stock was really, really low. And I thought, no, he'll still be a useful player. And, maybe he could have been, maybe he should have been, but he wasn't. So I was very wrong about that. But anyway.
Well, I mean, none of us. And this tells you how seasons change so much. There's not a single prediction in here about Miles Lewis-Skelly because none of us even thought he'd be in the plan for the season.
No, exactly.
By the way, this was recorded before these were done before the transfer window closed. So there's stuff in here that's just irrelevant, but that's because players moved. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. But it does show you like whenever if you get like 20 people to predict the Premier League table, the whole table, and you see how many of those positions anyone gets right, like if you get 4 or 5 right, you've done really well. There might be like a little bit of noise. I predicted them second and they're third. Like Newcastle, there's a bit of noise, but we generally thought no Champions League football. They'll probably get into the Champions League again, which is exactly what's happened. But I mean, if you'd asked all of us to do all of these predictions and say, by the way, guys, we're going to be without Saka for 4 months and Havertz for 4 months, then they'd look very, very different. They'd probably look closer to the reality because obviously, the reality changes. Then it has like a massive knock-on impact. And I think it really proves Arteta's point about, trophies. And again, in a very kind of polarized, almost deliberately provocative kind of online world, it's like, oh, what's he talking about? But like, didn't Liverpool get exactly the same number of points, goals and like goal difference or something?
I think they had 1 point more, but the exact same goals and goals allowed.
Yeah,
on the nose,
1 year that gets them third, the next year it gets them third, which is not to diminish what they did at all or anything like that. But it is true to an extent that when it is your time, it is your time. Yeah. Like Tottenham waited a long, long time for a trophy. They lost some finals in that time, but the stars aligned for them because the year the Europa League changes and there's no Champions League teams dropping in, they get the worst United team probably even in Clive's lifetime.
Yeah, exactly.
That long?
And you've seen them relegated.
I've seen them relegated. I saw when Dennis Law put them down. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
But, so like it was their time. And like I've really appreciated this kind of, this kind of dichotomy, particularly on the women's side as well. Like Arsenal women are not the best team in Europe, but they won the Champions League. And because it was their time to do it. It was their year to do it, and they went close a couple of years ago, lost the semi-final in the last minute. It was their time, and I firmly believe that what you have to do is you have to hang around. Yeah. That's what you have to do, particularly in the Champions League. It's the same for Liverpool, right? What have Liverpool done relatively consistently with a bit of noise? They hang around, and there's a couple of years it's been their year. Same for them in the Champions League. I hate to say it, but Chelsea in the Champions League as well, like the two teams that actually did it, very far from vintage Chelsea teams, but keep hanging around. And that I think is more the story for PSG than the kind of, they flipped the project on its head and all of that. There's a bit of that, but really I think what it's about for PSG is they were there every year. And then there's just a year where it falls for you. And I think that's what Arsenal have to make sure they do. Obviously, that is not to say that winning trophies is purely down to luck, but you do everything you can, control every margin you can, and sometimes it will go for you and sometimes it will go against you. So what Arsenal have to do is make sure that they compete at that level again next season and that they control all the margins that they can. And look, if Saka does his hamstring again, if Havertz does his hamstring again, I mean, we'd have to seriously reflect on why that is. And
yes,
we
of course.
Still have to reflect on why that is, because the other thing is as far as the human body is concerned, it doesn't conform to seasons. So in one respect, 23-24, we had an excellent injury season. All our players stayed fit, played loads and loads of games. But then this year that's flipped on its head. But actually, the human body doesn't just stop on the last day of the season and start again in August. It runs to a longer timeline than that. And really, if we're honest with ourselves, we maybe one hamstring tear, you're a bit unlucky, but when you've got 4 of them, you do have to reflect on that and why that is. But so we perhaps didn't do everything we could to control every margin on this occasion. But look, seasons are really unpredictable. Go and do your predictions. Like like this is a great exercise to do. Actually, I'd urge everyone to do it just to see how wrong you are about everything. Yeah. Like predict the Golden Boot, predict the table, predict who wins the cups. Like who predicted Crystal Palace to win the FA Cup? And sorry, I'll round this off with, if you're still on Twitter or whatever, a thread I love is every summer Carl Anker, who writes for The Athletic, he does something called the Bad Prediction Amnesty. And he's just like, leave me your kind of outlandish prediction for next season. And he does that in August and he brings it back up in May. And it's really interesting to see, because people will say, like, someone said under it last August, I think Chris Wood will score 20 Premier League goals. And which is obviously like a bad prediction, but actually he very nearly did it. Mine was that Nottingham Forest were going to be relegated, but they'd try and sue the PGMOL. And they got in the Conference League. They nearly got in the Champions League. Like, there's so much noise in a season, and even with finance making it a bit more predictable, there's just so much that can happen.
Yeah, well said, Clive. You want to pile on top of that?
Yeah, well, Tim mentioned something earlier on. It's in my head now. He mentioned like 1980 when we lost to Valencia in the cup final after losing to West Ham, and that was like probably the first time I ever cried over Arsenal. And then next time, about when it's your time, particularly in Champions League, obviously 2004 when we got Wayne Bridged, that was just the saddest moment of my Arsenal life, without a doubt. But actually, I'm going to say something to you now that actually is this year's semi-final in some ways as close as the Wayne Bridge moment. Because when you see the age of that Inter team, if you're an Arsenal player, you're playing that semi-final, you're thinking, if we win this game, we have a chance of winning the Champions League. And my brain was not there. You know, it really wasn't until I saw the devastation of the players. You know, and particularly in the first half against Liverpool, we saw devastation of the players. In our history, have we ever got closer to winning it than against PSG when we won the XG battle over both games? Elliot, think about it.
We were leading a final, so people are going to be saying that, so I have to at least raise it.
Fair enough. Like, that's a fair point. But you know what I mean about getting to the final and winning it. And winning it. You know,
people are acting like there weren't. That first 20 minutes in Paris, if Rice's chance goes in, if Odegaard's chance goes, they were crumbling. It was there. Yeah, it was very much there. Yeah.
But when we played, I don't want to dismiss the Barcelona again because I was there, but Barcelona were a top team, right? And we were the underdog. And so to get to that final, I mean, I was just happy to be there. I'll be straight.
Just relook at the lineup we had to put out, by the way. I don't think people realize how makeshift. You talk about makeshift lineup we had in this Champions League semifinal. Look at the one we had in the final. Now, granted, we had players like Thierry Henry. But...
It's Barcelona, right? One of the biggest clubs in the world. So you can't go into that thinking you're going to win it, but we could have won it, right? So, but if you think to this year and how we are and how we play and how difficult we are to beat, if we'd have got past PSG, I do think we'd have won the final. And that's really close. You know, that's really close. I have got this little concern in my head, and it's something we'll probably come out when we talk transfers, is that our floor and ceiling are getting too close together. Do you know what I mean by that? And I'm hoping when we're thinking, and when I say we, I mean the club, when we are thinking about the next step, I want to see us stretch that ceiling a little bit, you know, and because we're becoming, our normal level is becoming a little bit stale potentially. It can be viewed that way, and that. If we're saying that as Arsenal people, we have a problem coming, and we need to address it. You know, we really do.
Well, it's kind of interesting, actually. So I think there's a few things from these predictions, then we'll move on from take some questions. But underperformer of the season, I had Martinelli. And by the way, like, this is a guess, right? It's not who I hope underperforms or who I think is bad. Remember, underperformer means they performed less well than your expectation for them. I think that's important because, you know, you could pick someone like Sterling, but you have very low expectations from, right? Underperformer of the season, I picked Martinelli. 2 people picked Trossard. Those are both of your left wing. So going into last season, we had a concern that both of our left wingers could be an underperformer. And I'd say going into this season, we'd probably have the same concern if we don't address that position. So I think however you rate Martinelli, and I rate him pretty highly, I think he is underrated currently at present market value, so to speak. I think he's better than people perceive, but I think left wing is a clear area to upgrade. I think, first of all, I have to laugh at Paul again. I'm sorry, Paul, I love you so much, but he had the highest goals prediction for us at 92 goals scored. And then for all of the goals and assists over-under, he had under. So how does that work? Who was going to score the goals? He had Sterling scoring 35 goals, I guess. But all jokes aside, like when I look at it, Odegaard goals and assists level we set 20.5. He didn't hit it. Leo 13.5. He didn't hit it. Saka 24.5. He didn't hit it. Kai 22.5. He didn't hit it. Jesus 14.5. He didn't hit it. Martinelli 15.5. He didn't hit it. Like, and again, a lot of that is due to injury. But it is a reminder that football, as much as it is about tactics and coaching, right, and organization and rest defense and pressing structure and inverting fullbacks and half-space passes and progressive passes and zone 14, you know what it's about? It's about individuals winning in the moment. It's about Dembele's shot from the top of the box finding the inside of the post, but Donnarumma getting down to block to save Odegaard's, or Saka going over the bar. It's those high leverage moments. And I think we all know, and we can turn the ship here now, that going into this upcoming season, we need more players who will turn the high leverage moments in our favor, who will do something individually sensational. You know, and it's a bit of a nice feeling to know what's needed, but it is very much needed and it has to be done now. So let's quickly tell you about shaving your privates, because there is no time or moment where that is not the appropriate thing to be doing. And then we'll take a few questions on transfers. We'll do a bit of a transfer mailbag to round out the episode. So I will simply tell you that if you are in the UK, EU, or Australia, the white hot special edition colorway from Manscaped for the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra has officially arrived. If you're not in those zones, you can just get the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra in the regular colorway, which is what I have, and it's awesome. Join over 12 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and use code ArsenalVision for 15% off your entire order at Manscaped. Look, I have said this before, I will say it again. As silly as the whole Manscaped thing is, and we try to be silly and come up with funny puns, like, you do shave parts of your body, and that is not a thing you want to do with a bad product. And I think if you shave your privates, like being able to do it in the shower with long battery life, being able to do it wet, dry, get completely smooth, have fewer concerns about nicks, cuts, and irritation because of skin-safe technology, like that's all things you want. I am not exaggerating when I say I think I last charged my lawnmower like 6 months ago. The battery is so long. It works so well. It is such an upgrade from what I used to do, which is just whatever razor had been sitting in the shower forever, not the way to go. And if you find yourself doing that, I cannot emphasize this strongly enough. The quality of their products is top. So if that is what you want, then this is what you get. The white hot look, if you're in Australia, EU, or UK. The regular colorway, if you're elsewhere. The White Hot 5.0 Ultra brings the heat without cooking your skin. It's sleek, easy to use, and way less terrifying than whatever you were using before. Use code ArsenalVision for 15% off your entire order at Manscaped.com. That's 15% off with code ArsenalVision at Manscaped.com. Stay cool, stay smooth, and leave the burns to the sun. Clive, is that enough of that?
Indeed.
Nailed it. Okay, so now we can hit some listener questions. And there are a lot of really good ones, as is typical of the people that listen, because they are not only some of the most intelligent, but I'd say also very much the best looking people on the planet. I think it's important to point that out. And a lot of them are quite tall to me. Anyway. Okay, Clive, I'll just give you some fun real quick. This comes from Logan Caswell. If you had to choose a left winger for this project to buy, who would it be and why?
Flipping out, mate. Depends what day of the week it is. I go from, we just need to add one on top of what we have to, we need to sell the two we have and buy three. And that depends what day you catch me on. I'll be honest with you, Elliot, I don't like any of them. If I'm straight, the centre forwards, I'm fine with. I was talking to somebody today who's sort of well connected, and I said, look, I can see what we're trying to do. We're trying to get loads of steaks on the barbecue. Get them all on there, and then eventually we're going to pick a few. Right, so while we're going through that journey, we're going to see loads of rumours, and we're going to say, hey, he's coming. Well, actually, I don't think we've chosen anybody yet. But some of the left wing stakes, mate, I'm not sure about. So Rodrigo, I'm not sure about. Leao, mate, box of chocolates. What's the other ones? Gittins, I quite like him, but young. You are they going to do that to a 20-year-old? Very direct, very raw. I quite like his ability, but that's easy for me to say. My job's not on the line, right? So who else is there, Elliot, on the left-hand side? I can't even think who else now. Eze. I spoke about Eze at the weekend. And the reason why I brought him into my eye line as a left-sider, not like a Martinelli left-sider, but as a left-sider or behind a striker, like he does for Pace play a wing-back, I understand. So it's not the same left wing as we know. And I sent it out there. Of course, I got slapped about a bit. Clive, you don't know, he's the wrong profile. He's not going to come, blah, blah, blah. Once I got through that sort of stuff, I said to people, do we need to think differently about our left side? You know, do we need to think what we've done over the last few years? It hasn't really worked. So do we need to think about a different way, a different player? Back to where we talk about having dribblers to beat one-on-one guys. I looked at him, I thought, you're very good at that. I know you do a lot of your best work centrally. I know you much prefer to be inside, particularly at 27 years now. And he's not a left-winger Martinelli style. But again, I'm open to a different way of thinking, particularly after a down year that we've had this year in our attack. Why are we trying to cut and paste the same things on the same people, in the same style, in the same way? And so that's where I am with it, really. So I'm not convinced by any of them. The reason why I sort of landed a little bit on Eze, even though I know he's not going to come, is because at least I know he's going to do something. And I seem really happy in myself to be sending out YouTubes. I'm really happy to get these players in when I haven't seen them play 3 games in a week, ever. And I think sometimes we do that. We think about players outside our league and we put them on a pedestal. Well, actually, they're people in our league that we know are going to do something. And I know he's not the exact profile we're used to, but at the moment, my head is thinking more towards inside the league than outside the league.
Can I stay with you just for a second, Clive? Sorry, Tim. I got a good one for you teed up, but because we got it from so many people, so apologies to the people who asked it. And I'm not going to name check them, but basically your reaction to Leroy Sané. I mean, the rumors are out there. He's on a free. He played at City. I have to say that there's a part of me that wonders if people want to believe this because it aligns with their perception that Arsenal are cheap and won't do the business that's necessary, but it totally elides the question of whether the player is actually good and would help us. So do you have any further thoughts on him?
Well, again, he's a player that I absolutely adored. I mean, the Sterling Sané City was the best City for me, right? So one that stayed in my head. So he was part of that. He sort of fell out of Pep and went the other way. He's a wonderful athlete. Even at his age now, he's still really, really quick. And he's a sort of player that I've always liked. However, have we seen his best days?
He'd be basically the same age when he arrived for us that Sterling was when he arrived for us, which has people scared.
Yeah, he's a different level athlete. But hey, I haven't seen him recently.
So he's got, by the way, like 4,000 or 5,000 fewer minutes in his legs than Sterling does. It's important to point out. Yeah.
And he goes through major scoring droughts. And then he goes through games where you can't see anybody else on the pitch. He's that dominant, and we've suffered that, haven't we, for periods when we played against them last year. So there is something behind this, and let's see. This is one of the steaks on the barbecue, right? This is one of them, and I'm not getting sucked in on this one. But if he was, say for example, we were to sell, say, a Trossard, and then he becomes that auxiliary winger that comes both sides, then, but we're still adding a couple of forwards, so he's the third forward, then I can live with it. If he's the second forward and the checkbook's shut, we got an emergency podcast coming, mate. You know what I mean?
I totally agree, by the way.
And that's where we are, right? So we have to have quality as well as quantity.
Now, having said that, if you told me, and please don't roll your eyes, I'm simply saying it as a hypothetical, Isak is gettable, but he's going to be 110 million. That's the number. You can get him for 110. And we're going to do Isak and Sané instead of, let's say, Sesko and Nico Williams.
Yeah.
You know what? You may say I prefer the Sesko Nico Williams. I may say I prefer the Isak Sané. What I'm saying is you can defend it by looking at what the totality of the business is. And this is why transfer windows are a little tricky. I think you need to know what the totality of the business is to determine if a move is good or bad, right? Sané, as the third forward we add, I think is a really interesting and exciting option. And you've really powered up. Zane as the only wide forward we get, no. I think there is, for me also with him, the question is just sort of like, is this a player who still has the fire burning in him? He has not played a significant role in a long time. He fell out with Pep when he was sort of marginalized. I'd be worried. But anyway, Tim, I like this question. I think it is on everybody's mind right now, the whole trophies thing. So Pablo Angel Cruz asks, what do you feel our approach should be for the domestic cups? I appreciate that we shouldn't turn our noses up at a trophy, but I also believe a win in one of these cups will obviously be appreciated, but it doesn't move the needle enough. Thoughts? What should be our approach for domestic cups next season?
Yeah, so I would say League Cup, squad players and young players only. Not least, I think that was damaging to us this season. And actually, to be fair, it was... Because this is the thing about the cups, it's a card game, and you play the cards you dealt, and sometimes you get a really nice run to a final or something like that, and sometimes you don't. And in the League Cup, we got a nice run to the semi-final. So we did. It's not like, we really prioritised that and went for it. We got Bolton, we got Preston, and then we got Palace at home. Like, that was a reasonable run to a semi-final, and then we played a team to whom it meant the world. Right, my mate was on a train yesterday, and he saw it. He lives in Edinburgh now. He saw a Newcastle fan with the Carabao Cup tattooed on his leg. Right, that's like, there would have been no Arsenal tattoos about winning that competition. No. And I don't say that to make fun of Newcastle either. No. So in one respect, you play the hand you dealt, but I would, with the League Cup, young players, squad players only, and not only that, because I'd like to see our squad get bigger anyway. And, for your kind of Kiviors or whatever, you need to keep them involved. So it shouldn't just be, we'll just send out the stiffs because we don't care. It should be, we've got a nice big squad, we can use it. Right? That's what a lot of the a lot of clubs have done winning this competition in recent years. The FA Cup, so like League Cup, I'd Arsene Wenger it, basically. FA Cup, I think it just depends. I think it just depends on who you get, when you get them. We got Manchester United at home this year. We couldn't really go with our reserves for that. Whereas, when we played Bolton at home in the League Cup, we put a 16-year-old in goal. So I think it's almost impossible to have much of a policy over the cups, and it depends how your season goes as well. Because, like, if you're in trouble in April and you can't win the league and you can't win the Champions League and you're still in the FA Cup, that looks very, very nice to you to really salvage something. Ditto, if you're in February and you're in the Carabao Cup final, go for it. It's February. It's not gonna turp your season at that stage. So I think it's because of the way it's drawn. I think it's almost too difficult. But with League Cup, I'd really like no Saka on at half time at home to Bolton, no Saka on for the last 20 minutes away at Preston. We really have to evaluate why some of these injuries happened, and that's going to take some reflection, because as much as I'm on board with the thinking around periodization and keeping them going 20 minutes here or there, if we'd been knocked out by Bolton in the third round at home, we wouldn't have put like an internal friendly in the midweek that the Preston game happened. We wouldn't have replaced it with a game, would we? We'd have just taken the week off. So, like, I think we can stand to do that a little bit.
Yeah. I think you can make an argument that making the semifinals of the League Cup has cost us badly in 3 consecutive seasons. Okay? I think you can argue that. So I think it was not this season, not the season before, but the season before that. I want to say Xhaka got a red card.
Liverpool, yeah.
And then he didn't play Burnley, and we dropped points to Burnley. And that was a critical bit of drop points in the title run-in, which turned the City away game into a must-win instead of a game we could just hold on. Not to mention, who knows if those extra minutes cost Saliba the back injury. Not this season, but the season before, I want to say we played Liverpool in the League Cup semifinal. That was, that was a challenging physical tie. And maybe, just maybe, those extra minutes cost us a little something when it came time to come around to Bayern and the Villa game in April. And then this season, I don't think you can argue. Newcastle, physical, 2-leg semifinal against a team that beats you up. Kai Havertz started both of those games, by the way. I think it's worth pointing out we lost him soon after. Martinelli, we lost him soon after. Did that cost us Champions League? So I just don't want any part of that cup. I'm sorry, everybody. You can have your League Cup. Stuff it. I don't want it. I don't care about it. I don't want 2 legs of a semifinal against one of the big clubs in England in January and then a final in whatever it is, end of February, March. By the way,
we've got Champions League games now in January.
Ask Liverpool what the League Cup final does to domestic seasons. Wasn't it last season Liverpool came out of the League Cup final and then their form went in the toilet after winning it with kids because they were so depleted at that point? Now, we would have had, if we were still in the FA Cup, we would have had an FA Cup tie between legs of the PSG tie this season. Instead, we had the weekend off. We got a little lucky to have a weekend off because the team we were supposed to be playing was in the FA Cup, but that's beside the point. Point is, and I'm going to ask another question of you, Clive, that sharpens this. Yes, I want a cup, but I have been clear on this. I will not change my opinion. It's a great day out, especially the FA Cup. It means a lot to our club, and I'd love to win it. If we get 65 points out of the Champions League in the group phase and win an FA Cup, no one's going to be saying, what a great season. Nobody. So the FA Cup is a brilliant day out, and I'd love to win it. But if it costs us even 5% a shot at winning the Champions League or the Premier League, I don't want it. Now, maybe that's because I'm spoiled. I've seen us win a lot of FA Cups. And I've seen us win a lot of FA Cups in seasons I didn't particularly enjoy, by the way. And they meant a lot to me then. I just know we're trying to do something different now. And so, Clive, I'll ask the question Abdul J asked. Would you take a guaranteed FA Cup and 70 points next season? Or 90 points in the league and no domestic cups? And you don't know anything else about it. You don't know what that gets you on either end. Would you take the FA Cup and 70 points or 90 points and no cup?
What do you think I'm going to say?
I'm going to say 90, and I don't even have to bat my eyes. Now, a better question might be 86 points or 85, because now you're getting to the point where you don't know. But 70 might not get you in the Champions League. So you see what I'm saying, Clive? I'm loading the question.
You're loading the question, and not everyone's. It's a question. This is how I feel about football, right? So the things that I think and where we are in our life cycle is that we want to win the biggest trophies in the game. That's where we are, right? I was there when we beat Hull. And that was a big day, man. Big day when we beat Hull City. In fact, when we were 2-0 down, I was pretty upset, right? So to get that win, it meant everything. But that was where we were back then. You know, when we lost to Birmingham, that broke my heart. That was a League Cup final. That's not who we are now. Do you see what I mean? Who we are now is something else, right? So we've been proven to be one of the top 3 teams in the league over a 3-year period, right? So we are right there. And so my head is now thinking we need to win the biggest trophies. I have a tattoo on my arm, Tim. And then when I got it, it was after 98 double. That's when I got it. It wasn't after, a League Cup final. You see what I mean? It was after a double appearance. And the next one will come when we win the league. Do you see what I mean? And if my skin can hold itself together. and so that's where my head is. But I am aware that this, the Thierry Henry thing last week was very, very timely when he said that in the last 5 years, Manchester United have reached 5 finals. Right? So now the fact he said that to Manchester United legend Gary Neville with Roy Keane over his left shoulder, and he was in Manchester at the time, maybe a bit plain to audience, but it's a statement of fact, right? Now, we all want to be a bit better, but let's be honest. Erik ten Hag got fired and he won FA Cup and a League Cup before he got fired, right? So it's the big stuff that matters for us right now. If we mess up, we recruit badly, we end up in a situation where we have an aging squad on big money and no Champions League, then the FA Cup becomes a real prize again. Because we're never going to win the league. And Tim knows, we sat there watching the Liverpool teams turn up at the Emirates. We were watching them batter us, thinking we're a mile away from them. FA Cup soon comes into view. And that's not who we are today. So, mate, league or Champions League, that's where I am.
Yep. I'm in the same boat. And it's tough because this is where you've just got to be really clear on what you want and don't let anybody tell you you're wrong. You know what I mean? Do I want to win the League Cup or the FA Cup? It's not like I wouldn't have a blast. I'd love it. But for me, the thing that's going to send me to the moon and the stars is what we experienced with the women's team. Right? It's winning one of the big ones. And I think watching... Yeah,
Sorry, I was going to say, there is a balance in this conversation as well that can be difficult to strike. Again, particularly online, it's almost impossible to strike. I've said for several years what I don't want this team to be is Pochettino's Tottenham. I don't want that. I don't want that. That's a really good team, a generationally good team, but they didn't win anything. At the same time, Arsenal won the FA Cup in 2020. Are you telling me you thought they were a better team with Socrates and Mustafi and Maitland-Niles at wing-back and Ceballos in midfield and Pep? Like, go and look at that squad from 2020. Like, are you telling me that was a better team? You felt better about Arsenal at that point? No chance. But at the same time, I don't want to do that thing of explaining away when we're not winning anything forever. And I think getting the level right in that conversation is difficult because everyone varies on it a bit.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even think arguable that I enjoy Arsenal right now more than I did when we won the last FA Cup. Like that was not a good team. That was not a fun team. That was not a team that looked like it was anywhere near where it needed to be. So I don't know. It's tough because I feel like this conversation always winds up sounding like people saying they don't want to win trophies or domestic trophies don't count or aren't important. And that's not what it is. But I do think in this world of ever increasing competitions, now you have the FIFA Club World Cup, clubs have to make decisions about what they're prioritizing. And you can't really win as a manager, right? Because people will say, he didn't trust youth. You know, why didn't he start the kids in the FA Cup? Ethan could start in the FA Cup, or Max Dowman, next season, Max Dowman could start in the FA Cup. But if you crash out, then it's, how come we didn't take the cup seriously? And it's always this balancing act of you're supposed to rotate in the cups. You're supposed to give kids chances. But if you don't win, then you didn't take the cup seriously. And it is a difficult needle to thread. And that's why you need a true north on your compass. And you just have to follow your true north.
And I'd say parroting one of my favourite quotes ever, which is, it is with the elements, with your instincts as it is with the elements, they make good servants but bad masters. I'd say the same about the cups. They're good servants, but they're bad masters.
That's a really clever way to put it and a good way to move on. Okay, Clive, I think this is an interesting one based on the business we're expecting to do. Trenton asks, if Arsenal sign a striker, will Havertz rotate back to midfield, or will he start at striker for a while until the new signee is up to speed? And then what?
If we sign 2 centre forwards, then I think Havertz will go back into midfield. I like Kai Havertz, right? So
I do too.
And I think he's an excellent player, and I think he's a major miss for us at the end of the season. But you know what? It's in the post how we've done our recruitment up front. So yeah, I think if whoever we get, and I am leaning towards Sesko, if I'm honest with you. But if you got Gyökeres, I can make that work in my mind. I'm not going to turn my nose out at people who smash the ball in the net. I'm just not gonna, and because we need that in our club, right? So. And Kai Havertz is well versed in our model, understands all the principles of play, and I think it's a shared role. We've lost Jesus till the end of the year, so he comes back in time for the League Cup semi-final in January and play the next Champions League game. Tomiyasu will come back in time for those FA Cup games when January is obviously the pressure month now, isn't it? That's what it seems to be fixture-wise. So we need to have a really full squad by then. So yeah, I think Kai Havertz is going to play a lot of time up front, but also I think he's going to play a lot of time in the Odegaard role. And this is something to think about. And something that's on my head a lot, as we can all talk about things now with a level of hindsight. A lot of our season and a lot of our attacking play and how we play and how we execute and how pretty and exciting we look are wrapped up in Saka and Odegaard. And considering we lost one for 100+ days and the other for 2 or 3 months, but then when he came back wasn't all the way back, you've taken all the stardust out of your team, and we've looked pretty staid, and so we have to ask ourselves a question as people that just look at an organisation, look at a team, and look at its risks. Look at his single points of failure. We have a massive one with Odegaard. Massive. And that has to change. Regardless of his ability and talent, It has to change, So I'm looking for variation in that role. Who takes that role? Whether it be Ethan, whether it be Saka, whether it be Havertz. I think that role has been defined in one person and one person only, and I would like to see that role shared as well as the striker role shared, because then you can't see what's coming with Arsenal, and that's really important. So we have to change. Honestly, we have to change everything about what we think about our team. Not everything, because our principles of play are in place, lines, groups of passing angles, etc. But that position holds a lot, and we've got to be open to something different.
Well, I think that leads to a really fascinating question for you, Tim. And Clive, you're going to want to get in on this. You're not going to be willing to let this one go. OTP in the Discord asks, have PSG shown everyone the way now? And we talked about this a little earlier, right? You win Champions League and all of a sudden it's the way. But that true on-ball talent beats physicality. It looks like our rivals are doing the same. Wirtz to Liverpool, Marmoush and Cherki likely to City. And by the way, I really like Cherki. Recent signings and striker links see us getting more physical and less technical. Is that an issue in terms of play style going forward? And are we actually already behind the curve? And I will just add to that, we've kind of played with a non-striker striker. A striker who pulls out wide and goes into different positions, things like that. And there's been this talk that what we really need is a focal point, a guy like Sesko who's big and strong and he's a point of reference in the box and all that. But PSG just conquered Europe in style with a winger converted to center forward who plays all over the pitch. So what do you think about TP's question? Have we prioritized physicality? Are we prioritizing physicality at a time when the exact opposite is what our rivals are doing and what the champions of Europe just did?
Yeah, I take our rivals out of it. I don't think that's a good lens to look at it through. But I definitely agree that we've probably again, it's a level and all of that, and we've just gone with physicality over technicality. Maybe some of the decisions that are made, not just like in terms of who you buy, but who you lose, like Fabio Vieira and Emile Smith-Rowe coming out the squad at the same time. In one respect, that's probably accelerated Nwaneri's development, so hopefully there's a longer term payoff there. But yeah, we brought Marino into the squad and we lost Smith-Rowe and Vieira. Whether you think Smith-Rowe or Vieira are good enough or not, that took a little bit of technical quality out of our squad. And then when Odegaard went down, we had very, very little of it. When Saka and Havertz went down, we had almost none of it. We had very little subtlety. And to Clive's point, do we see this? Do we see this? I'm with Clive. I want to see all of it. I want to see Havertz left 8. I want to see Havertz up front. I want Sesko up front if he's the one we sign. I want them rotating. I want all of it. I just want teams to be stressed by us. And if it's 60, 65 minutes and we haven't scored, okay, we're going to change things around. Now you've got to deal with this guy and this guy. And I know I've said this several times in the last week, but I'm not going to tire of saying it. Arsenal women won a Champions League final largely because they had two very, very good forwards to bring off the bench, but also two very different forwards who at a stage of the game where things were going against Arsenal, and this was defensively, like Arsenal were getting penned in and they brought on a stretcher. And it was almost a defensive move as much as an attacking move. It's okay, we need to get out. Yeah, exactly. And that can be someone who runs in behind. That can be your hold-up player. You can do it many different ways. And it was just, okay, we need to get out. So let's bring someone on who can get us out. We don't have enough of that. I want all of those options, and I want teams to be scared of all of those options. And that also means sometimes bringing on a lock picker, a creative player. Do you remember not last season before, when we played Fulham? I think it was the game we threw away points and we drew 2-2. But what happened before that? We were 1-0 down. We brought Fabio Vieira on, and Brilliant. Because he operated in a space that Fulham weren't really picking up. And I think he got a goal. Did he win a penalty and get an assist or something? So
and nearly scored an overhead kick winner as well. Remember that one? Yeah,
exactly. So Fabio Vieira wasn't the guy for every game, but we start, for example, I think about a month later, we started him away at Everton because every time we go to Goodison Park, we want to keep the ball on the floor because there's no point in tossing the ball into Sean Dyche's Space Jam style centre halves. So we started Fabio Vieira away at Everton and we left Havertz on the bench. That's the kind of stuff I like. Or, last season we started Smith Rowe against some of those relegation teams where it's like, okay, they're going to put 10 behind the ball. Let's give them another ball player. I want to see more stuff like that. So I definitely want to see more creative profiles coming into the squad.
Yeah, that's fair. I will just point out, because I think this is important. If people are going to do the thing where they say, now that PSG won the Champions League, they're the model. PSG don't have a primary creator in midfield. They really don't have that role. In terms of expected assisted goals, like XA or whatever, their top XA guy in midfield is Fabian Ruiz, who's substantially below Martin Odegaard in that category. And then João Neves and Vitinha are below that. Where do they get their creativity? Kvicha, Dembele, Doué, Barcola. Where do we get our creativity? Well, it should, in theory, be Saka, Martinelli, Kai, or whoever plays in the forward role. Kai obviously unavailable, so wasn't able to do it. Saka unavailable, wasn't able to do it. Martinelli had a down season. But so if we're going to do the thing where we're saying PSG is the model, then you also have to acknowledge that PSG's model in midfield is functional, technical, pressing agents, ball retention, retain guys. It's Zubamendi, it's Odegaard, it's Declan Rice. And, look, even if you want to say, well, Declan Rice isn't João Neves or Vitinha, look, I'm not trying to split hairs. I'm saying none of them are 10s, is my point. None of them are 10s. None of them are Bruno Fernandes. None of them are Cherki. None of them are Verts. Well, he's not 10, he's false 9 or left wing, but you get my point. And Liverpool, for that matter, by the way, for all their attacking quality, McAllister, Szoboszlai, Gravenberch, they're all 8s also, right? So where do they get their creativity? Well, they got it from Trent. They got it from Salah. So I do think that we have to be intellectually honest. If we're going to point to Liverpool and City and PSG, Clive, and say, they're not going for a big, strong target man. Yeah, but their midfield also isn't comprised of a bunch of 10s that, of Eze's and Bruno Fernandez's and Cherki's. So what do you think of that idea that maybe we are doing it right, and that's why we're pretty good, but also that we seem to be pivoting to a different potential approach with center forward at a time where maybe that's not what's needed?
Yeah, so firstly, where should I start this one? Centre forward is not an issue for me. I think we need one, right? So for all the PSG stuff you're talking about, Elliot, the guy they bring on when they're struggling to score is Gonzalo Ramos, and he is that focal point centre forward, right? So he's not quite as good as Dembele in how they want to play in Europe at the moment, but I bet there are games when he's like the person they need to have in their team, depending on who they're playing against. For me, football is always in those half spaces, mate. The wide players, the creators, that's where it is. The wing forwards, that's where the creation is. Everybody's squeezing the middle now, aren't they? They're squeezing the spaces in there. Me and Tim had many discussions about number 10s. I'm never sure I see them right. I'm not having them. In the women's team as well, me and Tim, I'm not having them. I prefer 8s that can do both jobs and go back and forward and create and do all the jobs. All rounders where we're heading in that middle three. People that are good with the ball, that are ball heavy, that can move it. But you get it to people in the half spaces because everyone's defending narrow and they can travel and break teams apart. I think that's here for a while. Obviously when you're playing pressing teams that really push you back, then you have to have the ability to go over or around very quickly into wide areas. But even then, you're still going to wide people that can look after football and create shapes. So football's heading that way. I sway on this a little bit, Elliot. You speak about physicality, and I like physical teams. I definitely like it. I'll tell you when I really like it. When we get out physical by a team, then I think I'm not having that. We need to be physical, right? So when you get physical, you'll be reminded that Newcastle did it to us. When they do that to you, then you're going to say to yourself, I want more physical players in my team, right? So when we played PSG, for me, one of the high points of the season was that first 25 minutes at PSG away. I did not complain about a single thing about Arsenal football, apart from the players that weren't there. The way we pushed them back, the way we pressed them, the way we created shots, the way we created different efforts, the way we loaded the box, I thought, my goodness, we are right here. We just need to hit the back of the net. I don't do that every single week, but we had the ability to do it. Back to Tim's point, we want all of the players, all of the profiles, so we can change on any given day. And we're quite good at this. So we don't have to do it one way. As soon as we do, it will get stopped. We have to have variation.
Yeah. I would just say that whatever you believe is right, believe it's right ex post, not ex ante. You know what I mean? Or sorry, ex ante, not ex post. He says, not knowing what means what. In other words, if you think we should be going for skillful, versatile players that can pull out wide and change, then we should go for that. But if that doesn't work and we lack a focal point, at least you could say, oh, what we did didn't work, but you can't turn around and say, oh, we should have had a focal point. Like, this is why this is hard. You've got to make a decision what characteristics are needed in a team. And you could argue that what characteristics are needed in a team have all the options. Have a guy who can play this way and a guy that can play that way. But I actually don't see that from the best teams. The best teams, I think, have a way they play, and they lean into talent across all positions that can all play that way. That's what I see. You know what I mean? Is Barcola different from Doué? Not really in what he can do. Is he different from Dembele? Not really. I mean, like I just look at teams that are really good, and I think that they have options that are good analogs for one another.
Yeah.
And yeah, Clive.
I was going to say on the Barcola Doué thing, at the start of the season, maybe Barcola was slightly ahead.
He was, yeah.
And Doué's come in now and he looks really, really good. So when they're trying to win control of a game and really develop its shapes, etc., I think Doué's slightly ahead in ball carrying, particularly in smaller spaces. But once they've got the lead, mate, they bring on Barcola, and he is a motorbike. He can really run. So suddenly now, they bring on Barcola and Ramos, and they can go a bit longer. They can get people on the counter. And so what do? They've got another way of playing. And that's the key. That's the key. If you look at the bench, PSG at home, we couldn't change a thing, mate. Not one single thing, unless you want to put on... We had 2 goalkeepers there. If not, we may have had 3 goalkeepers on the bench. And,
this was his chance to sub one. He always said he wanted to.
and I think it was low. It was a low point from player availability perspective. So that's what you got to fix. You got to fix that.
Okay, last question. I want to get it from you quickly. Just this one comes from Topside Righty in the Discord. How many points wins the league next season? And if you want to tie it into Alejandro Felipe's question, what's the bull and the bear case for some of the direct competitors, City and Liverpool specifically? So how many points wins the league, and what's the sort of bull and bear case in a sentence or two, Tim, for City and Liverpool?
I mean, who knows what's going to win the league? Because
take a stab.
Yeah. I'm going to say similar to this year. I think
84. Wow.
Yeah, I think the Club World Cup will have an impact, but City are some of the players they're targeting are interesting. They look like they're ready to go a slightly different way, and I think it'd be really interesting to see. Like, I saw someone say they're signing fun players, which I don't think Pep always does either. So, no one knows what he's thinking, so they could be powering up. Liverpool, again, just depend on fitness of their key players. So I do think these 2 extra Champions League games, as well as the Club World Cup, might have not brought an end to the 90-plus point, but I think it makes it less likely. So, yeah, I'm going to say mid-80s again, but I do think there's some noise again in our competitors, but then none of us really predicted this from Liverpool last year. I don't think we dismissed Liverpool, but I don't think any of us thought, well, they'll be well clear by January and basically have it won. So it's really, really difficult to tell. I do think there are some clubs that PSR, that's going to be very, very difficult. What I would say, to keep this in an Arsenal focus, I do think next season's a massive opportunity for us again, just because, City have got that Club World Cup, Salah and Van Dijk are another year older, and I think one of the things that we'll have to get used to as football fans, I still don't think we've all entirely absorbed the impact of PSR, and I think what's going to happen with a lot of big clubs is every 3 summers you're going to have the PSR summer. I think we had ours last year when it was all you've got to sell to buy type thing, and we weren't doing the 100 million for Declan Rice, 70 million for Havertz. We had the PSR summer, the slightly quieter, we got to shift some players, we got to bring some players in. We're not in that position now, and a lot of doing that work was about creating room this summer. So as much as I've seen Arsenal can spend 200 million, maybe they can. It doesn't mean they should. The aim is not to spend all of your money because then you can't spend anything for the next kind of few summers. But we made some sales last summer and they'll stay on the books for a couple of years. Like, we got headroom to go this summer. I think it's really obvious where we need to improve, and that gives us clarity. It's too noisy with our competitors. I don't look at any of them and think you'll definitely win the league next year, or we'll definitely be fighting with you. What I want to focus on is us, what we can do, what we should do, and I think we've got good space to do it as well.
Good answer. Clive, how many points? And bull and bear case quickly for Liverpool and City.
Oh, okay. Mid-80s again. I think I'll give a slightly different reason. I just think there's a lot of smart teams out there now that are recruiting well and have a good management. They have a great style of play, and I make it difficult for everybody. They're not scared of the teams anymore, and so I think that will keep it down. Also, next year there will be 6 teams in the Champions League next year. And that means 6 teams are going to have what we've had this year, which is which we managed way better than last year, which is the stress and emotion of Champions League game on a Wednesday. I remember the first Champions League game, I can't remember who's against, the first year around. The first time we all were rushing in the stadium to hear the music, and we were all in there early, and it was like a major moment. I think we won it, and then we played Spurs on a Saturday. And we blew it. We ran out of legs. We were emotionally drained, and we had a 2-2 draw against Spurs at their very best. But normally we would just bop them, And so that's going to happen to other teams this year. Look at Villa. They played Bayern Munich at home, had an unbelievable night in their club. In the next league games, they couldn't win, right? So I think that's going to have an impact on some of these teams, really a huge impact on them. And I think we are better for that. That's where the floor side of Arsenal is a good thing, because we are able to do what Chelsea women have done, Tim, which is just churn out results in a stressful moment. Maybe too many draws this year because of a lack of attackers, but you know where I'm going with that. As for Liverpool, I think they just were the same team this year as they were last year. It was a manager that really managed them well in certain moments tactically. When he took out centre forward against City, I thought he did really well. He was really calm. He managed the airways really well. So you got to give him credit there. They really kept noise out of that club, despite having 3 guys of their best guys in the last year of their contract. How they managed that is a credit to their comms teams, shall we say? But I do think that they're going for a rebuild now. So I think it's going to be a challenge for them, But again, they're going to show a different attacking face of people and have the confidence to win the league. So I think they're going to start strong. But I think we can take them, depending on what we do. City are rebuilding, but they're going to jail, aren't they, Elliot? I mean, I'm sure they're going to jail. So what are you worried about?
That's the bear case for them.
Southend didn't make it up yesterday, a bit of a shame, but they'll be playing City, so don't worry about it, lads. You know what I mean? You can get some shirts. So yeah, I think City are interesting to watch. And what are they doing? With Pep Linders is the interesting thing, isn't it? They're changing their coaching staff. They're having a bit of renewal in there. And he has got some strong tactical views. Let's see what he does alongside Pep, what they do. Again, they're looking to change, looking to renew. So let's not cut and paste what we always did. I keep saying this to people. I'm arguing online a lot more these days. Let's not cut and paste it. Think differently. Open your mind up to think differently. My worry is I just worry about our ultimate ambitions, Elliot. But let's see what steak we take off the barbecue, right? Let's see.
Yeah, well said. All right, my final thing on this, I'll say 88 points does it. I think the bull case on Liverpool is Salah and Van Dijk have another top-level season left in them, and Havertz comes in and plays at the level of one of the best players in the Premier League, and they just basically are as good as they were. I think the bear case is clear. Salah and Van Dijk do start to fall away. Trent was a hugely important part of what Slot wants to do with turning recoveries into attack the other way, and his ability to be their creative influence. He is their top creative influence outside of Salah. That the AFCON takes something out of Salah and dents any progress they can make at that stage of the season. And their lack of a 6 just shows up, and Gravenberch can't repeat what he just did. So I think there's a healthy bear case there, but there's also obviously a great bull case. For City, the bear case, simple. Rodri can't come back at the level that he was. Kevin De Bruyne is one of the great players of all time in the Premier League, and they just don't find a way to be as effective without him, that their wide players still just aren't good enough. Doku isn't that good. Savinho isn't that good. Maybe we're seeing the flaws in Foden. I think Marmoush looks good, but it's too early to say. With them, maybe Cherky, is a fun player, but doesn't give them the solidity they need. The bear case with them is
back, obviously.
Right. Yeah, that's why I said he doesn't come back at the level that he was at pre-injury. Yeah. The bull case is just that they are loaded again. They've spent a ton. Haaland is the best striker in the world. Cherky is one of the great creators who provides him the service they didn't have without Kevin De Bruyne being at top level, and Rodri goes back to Ballon d'Or level, and they push 90 points again. I think it's always interesting when there's a World Cup following a season. How do players play? Are they trying to get into their national team? Are they protecting themselves towards the end of the season, not wanting to get injured ahead of a World Cup? That can make things weird. AFCON can make things weird. But I think 88, 89 points is roughly the target, and I think we will be one of the teams that has a chance to get there. My biggest prediction is with Club World Cup this season and with everything that's going on with international breaks, injuries will be a big driver of the outcome of the season again next season, and will continue to be a big driver. And actually, squad depth is going to be more important than it ever has been, because you're going to play bigger chunks of your season without your best players, and you're going to be expected to navigate those challenges. Whether that's fair or not, that's what's going to happen. Let's leave it there. We have tons of patron stuff coming this week, including tomorrow, including on Friday. We're going to be leaning into transfers because it is the transfer window, and it's technically open. So what do you got for us, Berta? Get to work. Haven't signed anyone. Not a single player been signed yet. Berta out. I'm kidding. Okay, let's leave it there. Tim, thank you very much.
My pleasure as always.
Clive, thank you and happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
My name's Elliot Smith. We love you. And we will talk to you after Arsenal's hand transfer window now.